All right.
Hi everyone, how you guys doing? My name is Jason, and let me just ask you guys one question. How many of you have been spanked as a child? As a form of punishment? Wow, a lot of you. Well, I'm right there with you. Let me bring you first to my first secondary claim, and which is pretty much the obvious, that corporal punishment has and can actually impose real serious injuries or even death. And tragically, one fatal case was a boy named James Wakaruru. His lifespan was basically from June 13th, 1994 to April 4th, 1999. Do the math, poor kid died at age of 4. And he died in Heights Bay Hospital, and basically his body was found to have extensive internal injuries and after prolonged beatings. And so he actually had an extended abdomen, extensive bruising along his entire body, cuts on his ear and lips, as well as tearing marks on his throat. And also bruises were found to his scrotum and a swelling in his right arm. Basically, it was concluded that he died from one extremely prolonged beating or several prolonged beatings. So it's plain and simple that it's dangerous and it hurts. You can even die. And actually, one writer for the Natural Child Organization, Jane Hunt, actually claims and writes that some children have become paralyzed even through nerve damage from spanking, and have died after mild paddlings due to undiagnosed medical complications. Now, so we talked about the obvious factor of pain, and now let me bring you to my second claim, which is basically corporal punishment is seen to be tied to many problems with behavior development for children. First, children who are physically punished are more likely to grow up approving of it and using it to settle interpersonal conflicts. That was actually written by Erwin A. Hyman in his book, The Case Against Spanking. Now, let me give you an example. In school, how many of you, if, say, someone pissed you off, what would you say? Excuse my language, I'm going to beat the shit out of him, you know? Or I'm going to fuck him up, you know what I mean? Like, excuse my language, but that's the reality. And that's been linked to be tied to how they grew up with a physical punishment for doing something wrong. You know what I mean? 2, a study was actually taken and recorded and written and published in Science Daily on actually July 26, 2011. So that was really recent. A study was taken on a school that used the corporal punishment as a method of discipline. The results were actually children in a school that uses corporal punishment performed significantly worse in tasks involving executive functioning, psychological processes such as planning, abstract thinking, and delaying gratification. The study suggests, as a result, children exposed to a harshly punitive environment may be at risk for behavioral problems related to deficits in executive functioning. So, plain and simple, even in the school situation, you know, there's obviously bad side effects. And 3, this was actually written by 2 renowned authors, Sanders and Goddard, in their book Physical Punishment in Childhood. Children around the world have revealed, so this is the children talking, the voice of the children, that have revealed that physical punishment causes physical and emotional hurt, resentment, confusion, hate, sadness, and humiliation. And you know what's funny is that parents actually come to regret hitting their children afterwards. Say, why did I do that? Why did I just do that to my kid? He's crying in the corner, he's in pain, he may be even in the hospital because of some unfortunate event. And this leads, basically, so we've actually covered the pain, and we've covered some effects after long terms in the growing up process. So basically, it all comes down to some people just see that being physical with their children is the only way to ensure discipline and a proper upbringing, which leads to basically how your culture, maybe even, and if your parents were brought up in that way, they're going to raise you and their children that way. And so basically it becomes a never-ending cycle of violence. And it's been recorded and thought that children that were actually beaten and abused turn out to be, or actually can have more potential to become criminals and violent people, or just plain rude and what's another word I can use? Basically not easy to get along with, and it shows in their behavior and their social life. And the only last thing I can really say is my own testimony, that I can attest to the depression and the pain and the suffering, because it's not a pretty feeling. And I thank God that I turned out okay, but that was only through some help from other people and prayer, but that's my own thing. So why risk it? Why should parents take the easy way out and just hit and get it over with? Thank you.
All right. Well, you ID'd the topic. You've got the audience survey that you're using at the beginning of the speech. That's okay, except I think later on that survey might hurt you a little bit, since so many in here admitted to having been spanked. Then they're immediately going to be wondering, well, you know, why do I not have all of these effects that you're talking about? Those consequences seem to be unlikely to have occurred in their experience. One of the problems that I see here is, especially with the example that you use at the beginning, you're equivocating physical abuse with spanking. And I'm not sure that anybody will say that spanking is the same thing as the horrible things that were done to that 4-year-old kid. You know, kicking a 4-year-old kid in the testicles is not a spank. You know, it's not the same kind of thing. And I think that you want to be a little bit more careful about making inferences based on an example like that. What you need to do is talk about how spanking maybe sometimes gets out of hand and does become abusive, and maybe it leads people on those paths. Because I think if you're talking about most people, you know, your parents swatted your bottom when you did something bad, they sent you off into the corner for something. I know that at the moment, kids are going to feel humiliation, but the notion that they become criminals based on that, I think, is a little bit problematic. On the other hand, if dad's response to everything that you do wrong is to take off their belt and smack you around, then I can see some of those problems. But you need to clarify that a little bit. I think you've got supporting points that you start off with, but they aren't very clear. There's some internal structure. The same problem is going on here. They don't really sound like they've been phrased as declarative sentences. It often sounds like it's just descriptive information. That's some of the problems with the evidence that you present, too. You give us a source citation, but it frequently sounds like you're paraphrasing what was said in the article instead of giving us a direct quote. And I think that that's problematic, because that means that we're having to accept your interpretation of what was going on there instead of seeing what the legitimate information was. All right, I got to stop because we got a whole bunch of people still to go, and we need to move.